Morrison, and I did my study on the effect of music on memory. A little bit about me. I attend Magna Vista High School. I plan to attend Virginia Tech in the fall to study mechanical engineering. So why did I choose this topic? During my childhood, I enjoyed listening to music. I also believe it's beneficial to help others with studying, and I had an overall question about it. So how does memory work? Memory works from dopamine, which is a chemical released in the brain that travels to the hippocampus, which is where all the memory is stored. It allows for memory to be created and remembered in your brain. Some negative factors that affect memory. Age is one of the main factors. It reduces dopamine levels in the brain, allowing you to remember less. Cognitive disabilities also affect memory, such as autism. It flutters the brain with outside information that your brain cannot process, causing you to remember less. Alzheimer's disease also reduces the amount of dopamine released in the brain. And dynamic visual noise also flutters the brain, allowing you to remember less from an overstimulated brain. Some possible solutions to improve memory. Both musical therapy and playing instruments have been shown to help reactivate dopamine release in the brain. So this led me to my research question of, does music positively affect memory? To begin my method, I set out a flyer at New College Institute asking for participants to join the experiment. I then had each participant fill out a consent form, which asked for their age, name, and if they consented to the experiment. I then brought each one to a separate room to eliminate dynamic visual noise and had them go onto a memory card game website to test. I tested them both without music and with music in two separate trials. I then collected the data both without music and with music in two separate columns. This led me to my hypothesis of my null being that there is no difference in the average accuracy or number of moves for the memory card game, and the alternate hypothesis that there is a difference in the average number of moves or accuracy on the memory card game. I checked my conditions, which were random, as I did a simple random sample to get 30 trials, which then passed the central limit theorem because I had greater than or equal to 30 trials, and 300 is less than all adults aged from 18 to 56. I then got the difference in the 30 trials, or 60 since it was a paired test. The chart there shows the differences in the data from music minus without music. I then gathered my test statistic of negative 5.36, which states that my data lies 5.3 standard deviations below a normal curve. And my p-value of roughly 0, which states that there's a 0% chance that I would attain these results from random chance alone. I had an x-bar value, or average mean value, of negative 2.7, which means that each participant on average completed the test in 2.7 less moves. The paired t-test also gave me these results on a graph. Anything to the left of the red line shows a increase in accuracy, and anything below the red line shows another increase in accuracy for the memory card game. For my results, I had a p-value of roughly 0, which is less than my alpha level of 0.05, meaning that I reject the null hypothesis because I have sufficient evidence to conclude that there is a difference in with music and without music on a memory card game. However, there is a possible type 1 error, which means that I could have had a false positive, or that there was no difference between music and memory. In conclusion, I believe there is a correlation between music and memory. This can affect study habits for later studying, and I believe it can help teachers who want to reinforce a specific lesson. Some of my limitations: I believe people will naturally improve on a memory card game, so I should have randomized music and no music. This time around, I just did it no music first and then music. My sample size was also only 30. I believe for a more accurate result, future researchers should test with a much higher sample size. I would like to thank Ms. Whitaker and Ms. Harrell for helping me with the math portion of my study. Ms. Spencer and Mrs. King, Ms. Spencer for helping me with the research portion, and Ms. King for allowing me to pick this topic. I would also like to thank the judges and audience for being here tonight. I will now take questions.
William, what type of music did you use, and how did you make that decision?
Based on the studies that I read, I used instrumental music, as all the studies I did only used instrumental, so I just kind of followed suit.
Jerry stole my question. Oh, great. I'll give you a preview on Julian. All right, I'll give you a preview. What music do you like to listen to when you're studying?
I enjoy, right now it's kind of bluegrass. It changes a lot though.
Okay.
My question is
What made you choose for folks in college?
I work there, so it's just a convenient sample to get.
Did anything in your research have anything to do with the fact that, like, usually if something is like sung or maybe sing-song, you would remember it better, like the alphabet?
From the articles I read, none of them said anything about that. But based on my own knowledge, I believe that it could definitely help people memorize better if it's sung.
Hi guys, welcome back from your break. My name is Destiny Witcher, and I did my SRP on the effects of fertilizer on stem. Oh my gosh, this happened during practicing. I'm sorry, but it happened, and yeah, it was fine. Green beans go, guys, and I'm good. As an introduction, I go to Martinsville High School, and I plan to attend University of Virginia in the fall to major in psychology to become a school guidance counselor. I chose this project because it was just convenient. It was just convenient for me since my mom, she's the biggest green thumb that I know. And if I needed any help, I knew that I could easily just ask her, and she would be more than happy to help me because she's my mom and she does plants. I also chose it because at the end of the study and the experiment, I would still be able to use my products. I wouldn't have to just throw them away. Since they are plants, I can use them. And since they're tomato plants, my mom actually makes a really mean tomato sauce, and she makes her own pizzas. So, guys, I'm in for a treat. And this is also just easy for anybody to replicate on their own, even if you don't really have the best knowledge of gardening. You can still learn the basics, and it'll be enough to plant your own crops. And it's also a really great learning experience since it's a trial and error kind of thing. You can learn a lot of stuff that you can apply to the real world. Another reason that I chose it is because crops are just important. Crops give us most, if not all, of our daily nutrition, and they also just give us most of our energy. You can also see that in, people like vegans and vegetarians, they eat all green, and they're, some of the most energetic people. Crops are also grown. Some people have their entire jobs to be, to grow crops. Farmers, for example. And if we didn't have people like farmers to grow our crops, we wouldn't have produce in the grocery stores. So being a farmer is one of the most important jobs that's out there. And also, crops have a lot of benefits that are even medical benefits. In historical times, you hear a lot about how people use crops for medicine. And you can also trace back our modern medicine to historical medicine. Now, of course, we have better technology and stuff like that. But you can also, if you have the right knowledge, you can make your own medicine from crops still to this day. But with such an important job, you're also going to have such heavy burdens. And some of of these burdens, they can be, they can be out of your control. With the regular job, like being a teacher, sometimes you do have things out of your control, but other times, you might just be able to go to work and be like, yeah, I'm gonna have a great day. And you will have that great day. But if you're a farmer, sometimes your day might be ruined for unforeseen factors and uncontrollable things, such as things like flash freezes that can just kill your crops, or animals getting to your crops like pests and insects, or just crops getting sick and die, because they like to do that a lot for some reason. But when you have such unforeseen factors and such things that you can't really control, it can make you worry a lot about your job. About, you might go to sleep at night thinking, oh, am I going to be able to make my days pay tomorrow? Am I really going to be able to pull my way through? And when you worry about things such as this, it can manifest into your physical health. And I don't know if you noticed, but I have been sniffing a lot, so you can tell I'm a little stressed, but it's okay. And when things get as bad to your physical health, it's pretty common that you will want to go out and try to get it assessed. But a study done by Parrish in 2020 found that since farmers have such an important job and such a heavy burden, they aren't really likely to go out of their way to look for that help. But their job can get a little easier, and some of those burdens can be lifted by the use of fertilizer. Fertilizers promote soil health and plant health. You have different fertilizers such as chemical fertilizer. Chemical fertilizers can be used best to support the plant's health. A study done by Turhan and Osmond found that the best fertilizer to use for your crop health was actually a chemical fertilizer, because it accesses the chemical nutrients of the plant. But a study done by Lucena found that organic fertilizers were best at promoting the soil health. This all led me to my research question: what fertilizer yields the tallest stem plant in tomato plants? To begin my experiment, I gathered supplies. I got tomato seeds, I got Miracle-Gro chemical fertilizer, and I got organic fertilizers. I had a home compost made by my mom, and I also had a Dr. Earth's plant food. All of these, except for the home fertilizer, all of these were supplied to me by Piedmont Government School. And to actually carry out my experiment, I planted 2 seeds per 36 cubicle trays, resulting in 72 plants. I covered them in plastic wrap, and I set them aside on a warm surface so that they were allowed to germinate. And after about 2 to 3 weeks, they did germinate. And after they did, I transferred them to their own pots, 72 in total. And after about 3 more weeks, I measured how tall they were. This led me to my hypothesis and my statistical analysis part of this. For my null hypothesis, which is what's widely accepted and what's most known, I have that the mean plant height for each fertilizer would all be the same, and that there would be no difference. And for my alternative hypothesis, which is what I'm trying to prove, is that the mean height for each plant between fertilizers is not the same. I ran this at a 95% confidence level, meaning that I am 95% in my results, leaving me a 0.05 room of error. For my descriptive statistics, I computed X-bar and standard deviation. My X-bar means the average of how tall my plants were, and my standard deviation was how far through my sample my plants fell. For my Dr. Earth's organic fertilizer, I had a mean height of 18.92, and I had a standard deviation of 4.22. For my home compost, I had a mean height of 11.03 and a standard deviation of 2.89. And for my Miracle-Gro chemical fertilizer, I had an X-bar of 23.37 and a standard deviation of 3.05. Here's just this in the graphical display. As you can see, the stars represent the mean, how my mean fell on my graph, and as you can also see, the green represents the Miracle-Gro, and it's pretty much, the tallest. You can see that it's much higher than how the home compost did regarding how tall the plants were. For my test, since I was comparing means for 3 groups, I ran a one-way ANOVA test, and I got an F statistic of 58.67, meaning that there is great difference between my groups. And I got a p-value of nearly 0, which means if my null hypothesis was true, then I would get these results based on random chance alone. if all of my fertilizers were to give the same exact stem height, then I would have a 0% chance to get this. For my results, since my p-value was so low compared to my alpha level of 0.05, I was able to reject the null hypothesis, which means that I had to run an honest significant difference, and it's called Tukey's test for honest significant difference. And for my study, I compared it to the number 3, and each of my groups were found statistically significant from each other, showing that there was clear variability in the height for each fertilizer group. So from my analysis, I found that there was obvious stem length variations and that the fertilizers didn't all produce the same results. I think that this will also be useful for people who grow economical crops, like farmers, or not even farmers, people who don't consider themselves farmers, or gardeners who supply their local farmers markets. And also, as you know, with a taller plant, you have more room for your fruit, more room for your crop produce. And I also found that chemically engineered fertilizers are best to use in moderation. It's super easy to kill a plant, so you gotta treat it like a baby. It's super easy to accidentally overfeed them with fertilizers. So when you use these in moderation, it covers both chemical fertilizer benefits and organic fertilizer benefits. But all studies do have their limitations. The biggest limitation I have for mine was the growing space. I didn't really have that big of a space since I had to start my inside. And since I start my inside because I didn't really plant it in the season that they were supposed to be in, only because of the time frame I had for my project. And for anybody who would try to redo this, or if I myself were going to replicate this, I would say either restrict your sample size or expand your growing area. And I want to give a special thank you to my mom for helping me so much through my project, for my cat for being extremely nosy throughout the entire thing, Ms. Dillon for helping me pick which crop would be the best for my time frame, Ms. Spencer for helping me, and listening to me talk about plants all day in class, and Ms. Harrell for her extremely supportive video that I watched before my presentation. And I would like to thank the judges and the audience for sitting here listening to me talk about plants. I will now take questions from the judges.
So I have 2 questions.
Mhm.
Number 1, what is your cat's name?
My cat's name is Yang. He's a white and orange mix, so you can assume, how he gets up to.
Yeah, he's orange. He must be orange.
Yeah.
Second question. When I think about fertilizer and plants, I think about how big the fruit or vegetable is going to be. Why did you decide on stem length instead of size of the actual fruit or vegetable?
So I actually would have preferred to do something on tomato size, but since I didn't have the largest time frame, I had to go with something that I could get done fast and still have an interest in.
I was gonna ask if you expanded your project, would you look at the size of the tomatoes, which goes along with it?
I would, and to add on to that, I actually probably would also factor in different tomato species and different kinds to see which grew the best, the fastest, the tallest, and with the best produce.
So I know not counting the compost, because that stuff is essentially free because you're building it yourself, right?
Mhm.
Of the 3 that would cost money, which would be most cost efficient?
I think what would be most cost efficient is the organic fertilizers, because in my study, I have a classmate and his grandma owns a farm, and I use the chicken poop from his grandma's farm for the organic fertilizer. And I just see that as an opportunity for people to reach out to local businesses or local farms, and I think that could really emulsify yourself more in the community.
All right, let's say time was not a factor in this at all. Let's live in that alternate world for a moment. Time wasn't a factor or anything like that. Would you still use tomatoes, or would you choose another fruit or vegetable, and which one?
I think I would probably still use tomatoes, only because I know I said it as a joke, but my mom really does actually make good tomato sauce. So it would kind of be growing her groceries, you know?
There you
But
go.
if I were to choose a different one, it would maybe be, maybe strawberries.
Ooh.
Strawberries are pretty good too, you know? And, you know, a lot of people grow strawberries and, you know, not to brag, but my mom's also growing strawberries.
Nice.
You mentioned using organic fertilizer. In your research, what are the adverse consequences, I guess, of using chemical fertilizer? Did you run across that in your research?
Yeah, going back on what I said earlier about, you know, being able to easily kill your plant, it's also, if too much is used, you know, it can really strain the plant's health and essentially stress the plant out. And it can also make the soil around the plant super acidic. So when you're using chemical fertilizers, that's one thing you should watch out for. You know, there's actually, I don't think you should hold thermometers, but there are actually devices that you can use to monitor the acidity of your soil. So yeah, that's one of the biggest effects that chemical fertilizers have on plants.
Thank you. Next up, we have Laura.
Hi everybody, my name is Laura Dillard and I did my senior research project on gender stereotypes in children's literature. A little bit about me, I'm Laura. I go to Magna Vista High School and I plan on attending VCU in the fall where I will major in journalism because I'm very passionate about social issues. I chose this project because again, I'm very passionate about social issues. I find this topic specifically and many other controversial topics to be interesting, and I like to read. Gender stereotypes originate with the people who are first exposed to children, which is their immediate family. And this can be shown through culture as well as religion. Some religions and cultures have certain ideals of what a man and a woman should be and how a wife and husband should be. Also, nonverbal bias consists of facial expression and tone. Both of those everyone in this room has. And when talking to a child, since they have such spongy little brains and they take in everything, it's really easy for them to pick on cues such as that. A study done by Thompson in 2020 proves that when a parent reads to their child, they pick up on the emotion and tone that they project during the reading, so that can affect the way a child's opinions about certain things are. Also, outside origins. As a child grows up, they go to school. And when they go to school, they meet other children, and those children are taught by their parents certain things as well. And so they're exposed to those beliefs that those parents' beliefs. Also, instructional material. A lot of instructional material is historic, and history is not as inclusive as we are today. A lot of history contains controversial topics such as gender stereotyping, which means that children can internalize this and not realize the effects of it. Also, media. Media is more than just social media. Media can be books as well as TV. Some TV, anything made by a person is going to contain bias. Therefore, children can internalize the things that they consume. To begin children's books, a lot of children's books have mainly parental roles. In my research, I found that majority of the children's books I collected had parental roles within them. And a lot of the books also had feminine and masculine identifications, meaning that a lot of the books were targeted towards a boy, just like specifically targeted towards little boys or little girls. And by doing this, they would have, like for girls specifically, they would have pink books with princesses and mermaids and things. And with boys, they would have blue or green with trucks and like tools and stuff. Like I said before, they have parental figures. Through my research, I found that not a lot of father figures are shown in children's books, and when they are shown in children's books, they are shown teaching a kid how to do something, not acting as that caregiving person that a mother usually is acting as. And not many books, out of my research, not many books were found that have gender nonconforming children, meaning that a lot of the books were very strict about what a boy is and what a girl is, and what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. In a study that found by Campus, he read a book about a little boy who liked to wear dresses and paint his nails, and he read this to children in a kindergarten class, and they had never heard of this before, and so they thought that something was wrong with them, meaning that gender nonconforming kids are not shown this, and they are not aware that not everybody is the same. So this all leads me to my question, which is, are gender stereotypes in children's books? So to begin, I curated a list on Google Docs, which consisted of a checklist of typical gender stereotypes I found in my research. I used the paper provided to me here at Governor School, as well as the printer, and I used my truck Phillip to go to both Blue Ridge libraries, where I brought my checklist with me. I went to the Martinsville Blue Ridge Library and the Ridgeway Blue Ridge Library, where I collected 15 books from one and 15 books for the other, which checked out my conditions, and it allowed me to have a variance of samples, so it wasn't just from one place. I had 30 printed out checklists for each of them, and I kept these checklists in my research binder. So my hypothesis, the null hypothesis, which is what I'm trying to disprove, which is what a majority of people believe, is that less than half of children's books contain gender stereotypes. My hypothesis, which is the alternate hypothesis, is that more than half of children's books contain gender stereotypes. I ran my test at a 0.05 level of significance, which means I'll be 95% confident in my results. As you can see here, I only found that 7 out of the 30 books contained a significant amount of gender stereotypes, which means the remaining amount, 23, did not. And I found that my statistic, which is Z, is in the negatives, which means I am below average in my mean. I ran my test at a 1-prop Z-test because I'm comparing my hypothesis to a claim, and I'm doing this with proportions. I found that my p-hat, which is what was previously stated, but this is just the decimal form of that, is that about 23% of the books that I collected contain gender stereotypes. And my p-value, which is very, very high, almost 1, means I was wrong. So to conclude, I failed to reject the null hypothesis, and this means that not as many children's books contain gender stereotypes like I thought. So this is a good thing. In the end, it does make me look a little dumb, but it is a good thing that not many books contain gender stereotypes. This is good because we are progressing as a world, and we all need to be accepting of each other. And it's important because nowadays children are being bullied very much because of their identifications. And so it's good to be knowledgeable about this at a young age so that as they get older, they don't judge other people for that. Some of my limitations include sample size. I did collect 30, but that checked out my conditions, but I could have collected more, which would have made my results more accurate. The population, I only did this population, which is Martinsville, and if I were to do this test again, I would want to do it worldwide, so it would be more generalized. And for my checklist conditions, I made sure that each of the books that I counted having a gender stereotype checked off at least 5 of the conditions, therefore my bias wouldn't be perceived through my work, and if I were to ask someone else to look at this book, they could also agree with me and say that it contained gender stereotypes. I'd like to thank my dogs Jewel and Pumpkin, because they're so great, and I'd like to thank Miss Spencer for helping me all year, and Miss Hamill for helping me with my math. And everyone here today. I'll now take a question.
Do you feel that the children's books you read growing up had a positive, negative, or neutral impact on how you ended up thinking about gender?
I definitely think that they did have a negative impact on the way I perceive things at a younger age. Of course now, due to media and me being exposed to different people, I have a broader view and broader judgment of things. But I definitely think that if I were exposed to more inclusive books at a younger age, I could have saved a lot of my time with figuring out what's deemed right and wrong.
When you chose your books, did you go towards ones that you had really enjoyed as a child? Or did you just randomly choose maybe ones that stood out the most, or how did you make that determination?
When I went to the libraries, I conducted a simple random sample and I did a systematic sample where I randomly generated a number and I would start at that number on a bookshelf and then I would count by every 10th book, so it wasn't biased to what I was choosing, it was a generalized experiment.
How do you think the study might be affected if you had expanded the, I want to say grade level to the teacher, the age level for those books, like into chapter books that might be middle grade readers explore?
Due to my condensed amount of time, I wasn't able to, go through each and every chapter book to read and see if they contain those. So I was only able to do children's books because it was easy to flip through. But if I were to do that, I think it would have worked out in my favor because I do like to read, and I do notice a lot of gender stereotypes within the literature that I read specifically and the literature that my peers read. So I think it would have ended up in the favor of my study.
So I know that you did, that you're wise about how you did your sampling and it was random to the point, but did you happen to notice when a book was published, that you might see more versus less stereotypes in there?
I did notice that. I also noticed that the author also had to do with that. I had a few books that were by the same author that I noticed that they contained a bit more gender stereotypes than other books. And I found that some of the older books were a bit more, contained a bit more gender stereotypes.
You mentioned some of the things that you consider gender stereotypes, referring to color and activities. What were some of the other things that may have been on your checklist for conditions to consider them stereotypes?
Within my checklist, one of the things that I had was that if a father was even in a children's book, because I found that not many of them were. Another was if a mother was only depicted in a kitchen or taking a child shopping, and when a father was being depicted in a children's book, were they taking care of the kid or were they babysitting? Or were they teaching the kid how to do something, or were they, making dinner? You know what I mean?
Thank
We have Lakin next, but I'm actually going to pause and adjust the lights a little bit here.